Hey, folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. It is Thursday, January 23rd. I'm Alan Saunders, and today we are talking about Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Tee Higgins from a really good question from Benjamin44, a longtime member of the audience here who wants to understand why it's possible that the Bengals might be able to keep Tee Higgins from signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Higgins, obviously the best wide receiver set to hit the free agent market this offseason. The Steelers, probably the most wide receiver needy team in the NFL, but it may not be that simple. And the reason is the franchise tag. Benjamin hits at that in his question, so let's go here. If a team has no pending free agents they'd like to keep, my understanding is they can tag a pending free agent just to be able to get trade compensation, even though they have no intention to keep that player. In the case of the Bengals and Tee Higgins, I'm guessing that teams won't offer as much because they know the Bengals are just trying to pick up a draft pick. However, the teams will be trying to outbid each other, which may drive the price up. Also, do you think the Bengals would accept less from someone other than the Steelers just to keep Higgins out of the division? Please shed some light on how all that works. Thanks, and keep up the amazing work. I'm headed over to Steelers now to check out your article. That was a comment on yesterday's Morning Rush about the Steelers' offseason needs, and that article is still over at SteelersNow.com at the top. If you haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to do so. So when it comes to the franchise tag, there are a lot of moving parts here. I will try to make this the simplest answer possible. The Tee Higgins played under a franchise tag contract last year, and so the Bengals can tag him up to 3 times. So they can tag him again this year. His minimum amount of a contract to be a tag tender is 120% of his previous year's salary, or the top 5 average of the top 5 salaries of the wide receiver position of the last 5 years. His salary is going to be higher, so 120% raise for Tee Higgins means the Bengals have to offer him a 1-year, fully guaranteed contract worth $26.1792 million. Once the Bengals offer Tee Higgins that contract, they control his rights for the 2025 season. Okay, even if they don't really want Tee Higgins at that amount. So here's what can happen. If they sign him to a non-exclusive franchise tag for 26, or if they offer him a non-exclusive franchise tenure for $26.172 million, Higgins can go to other teams and say and negotiate a contract. This is what happened with Lamar Jackson a couple of years ago. You remember there people say, "Oh, why aren't teams negotiating with Lamar Jackson even though they could have him?" Because Cincinnati gets the right to match any contract that guy negotiates with another team. So let's say the Bengals tag him non-exclusive, $26.1792 million. Tee Higgins goes to the Steelers and says, "Hey, all right, how about like 5 years, $125 million?" The Steelers are like, "Great, that'd be awesome." The Bengals like, "Oh, great, that would be awesome for us too. You're ours." There's nothing at that point that Higgins and the Steelers can do. The Bengals can just say, "Yes, we agree to that deal," and now he's signed to the Bengals for that amount. The Bengals can also say, "Actually, we're good. We didn't want Tee Higgins anyway. We couldn't afford him." And the deal that Higgins worked out with the Steelers comes into effect, and the Steelers owe the Bengals 2 first-round draft picks. Pretty high price. Not saying I absolutely wouldn't do it for a player like Tee Higgins, but probably wouldn't. Then you have a trade. So if either no deal is worked out with Higgins and another team, and he signs a tender, or there's another step here. The Bengals can actually sign him to what's called an exclusive franchise tender, and that means that Higgins cannot negotiate with another team while he's on the tender before he signs a contract. That price is higher. That is the average of the top 5 salaries at the wide receiver position at the moment that the tag is signed. Each of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL, I haven't done the math, are making more than $30 million a year. So let's just guess about $32 million that would cost them instead. So they could offer the $32 million tender, and then Higgins would not be able to negotiate with another team. But if the Bengals really don't want him, and they're just signing this tender to control the process, after Tee Higgins signs that tender, that becomes a legal contract for that year, but it does become a tradable contract. At that point, the Bengals can say, "Who wants Tee Higgins for 1 year, $32 million, or 1 year, $26.179 million in the first example?" And they can trade him, and they can get whatever they get for him. And as long as this process happens before July, then that new team can sign him to whatever contract extension they want. So if you're the Bengals and you look at Tee Higgins and say, would really like to keep him, would really like to work out a long-term deal, you can tag him to control the process and say, okay, if he's not going to sign with the Bengals, we want to have some say in where he goes, either by getting some compensation back through the non-exclusive franchise tender process or by a tag, sign, trade process. But they are taking on some risk. They're taking on the risk that Higgins is going to say, okay, great. Actually, I'll be glad to be back for Cincinnati for $26 or $32 million. Now pay me. Now find a way to fit me under the salary cap. They would have to be able to do that. In fact, they would have to be able to do that right away. He could sign it at any time, and then they would have to be salary cap compliant. So there is some risk for the Bengals to take that path. They would probably be jeopardizing their own ability to sign Jamar Chase to a contract extension, which they also would like to do this offseason. And so there's definitely some risk to the Bengals trying to control the process this way, but there's absolutely a huge benefit. They could get up to 2 first-round draft picks or just something for Tee Higgins when they're probably going to lose him for nothing, because they would get a third-round comp pick for him almost certainly if he signs a huge contract. But they would definitely want to control the process. Now, in terms of being able to keep him specifically from going to the Steelers, if it's the non-exclusive tag, the 2 first-round picks, the Bengals can't stop Higgins from talking to the Steelers. They can't. He can talk to whoever he wants to. He can agree to whatever contract he wants to. In fact, he doesn't have to take the highest contract. He can agree to a lesser contract to play with a specific team that he wants to play with, and that's fine. If it's the tag sign trade process, then yeah, the Bengals can absolutely just say, we don't really want you, and we'll allow you to seek a trade. We'll allow you to negotiate terms with a new team as we facilitate this trade. The only reason we tagged you is because we want to get something back out of this process. But also, we are not letting you go to the Steelers under any circumstances. Don't even bother to ask. And by the way, the Ravens probably, just as, maybe not just as wide receiver needy, but certainly are a team that would love a player like Tee Higgins. So, yeah, part of the benefit for the Bengals of taking that risk is being able to control the process a little bit about where Higgins goes, in addition to the draft pick compensation they might be able to get in return for him. They can also just keep him, which may be difficult to fit under their salary cap situation, may bring up questions about their ability to keep players like Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson long-term, but it's certainly an option for them as well. It's not like they can't make the salary cap work. You can also always put yourself in the situation the 49ers put themselves in when they re-signed Brandon Ayuk, and that it's very easy to sign a deal and be able to pay for it today. The problem generally comes down the road, as most of these contracts are backloaded in some form or fashion. So, at the end of the day, I wouldn't get your hopes up about the Steelers being able to sign Tee Higgins. And if they don't, it probably won't have anything to do with the inability of Omar Khan to attract a free agent or the willingness from Art Rooney to pay the asking price. The Bengals control a part of this process, and they're going to do everything they can to keep Higgins from becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler. Hopefully that answers your question. Great question. I appreciate it a lot. Everybody knows if you want a question for Morning Rush or Afternoon Drive, just leave it in the comments. And if we like it, we'll get to it. If you compliment us, we'll definitely get to it. And we really appreciate all the members of our audience, especially as we get in the offseason, because now is the time where I can really dedicate like a whole show to something like the franchise tag process and how it may affect the Steelers in their pursuit of Tee Higgins. That's all I got for today. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications on the YouTube channel as our drive towards 15,000 subscribers continues. And until next time, enjoy.